Greetings and welcome to today's 10-minute painting lesson. Quickly, before we begin though, I would like to quickly note that my book, Acrylics for Beginners, is still currently on sale for 30% off and will be until New Year's. So we are in the final 7 days. If you would like to get that, if you would like to learn just all of the basics, all of the things you need to know before you jump in, there is a link to that in the description. With that being said, let's jump into today's painting lesson. So, we're going to begin here today, as we generally do, with our large, damp, square-headed brush. Here I'm using a mixture of a French ultramarine blue and a titanium white. However, you're more than welcome to use a primary blue as well. The French ultramarine just has a little bit of red in it, which renders a nice warmer blue. Then from there, I'm going back to my palette. I'm grabbing a similar mixture with a very small amount of Mars Black as well. I'm applying that on top of our initial application, and I'm blending the two softly in a smooth gradient. Then I'm taking an even darker variant of that, applying that on top, and yet again, blending downwards. The goal here is to render a smooth transition, one very much void of brush strokes or implications, and that is generally best achieved by having a damp brush and also using a very soft application. The more pressure you use with your brush, generally, the more of a streaky aesthetic you will render in it. So, with that said, you can see that I'm just kind of going back and forth over the canvas, smoothing everything out, and ensuring we have something nice and soft. Then I'm moving back down to the ice or water area. I'm taking the same blue that we used initially at the horizon level. I'm applying that, and then I'm taking our darker pigment and applying that underneath. Yet again, I'm going to blend the two. This time we aren't using that middle variant color just because we don't have that much space, and I do want a fairly heavy contrast. Then I'm going to take that brush and I'm going to incorporate some very subtle mountains in the background, as you can see here. They aren't very detailed, they're very nice, they just kind of blend in, and I do that so they don't take up too much of our attention. Sometimes it's important to create subtle subjects in your painting so that other subjects really stand out. You don't want everything to be too overwhelming. So there I just kind of gave it a fairly blank base. Here I'm going back and I'm applying additional layer because our brush was fairly damp and it thinned the paint to the point where it wasn't very opaque. So there, as you can see, we just fixed that up nice and easy. We left some of it a little bit showing through, so there's a little bit of blue. It looks like there's a bit of reflected light. Now I'm taking a little bit of titanium white and incorporating that on the other side as well, just so it isn't a stark black, just so it has a little bit of added dimension. Generally, if you want to render depth in a painting, try to ensure that you don't just have a single color. You want highlights, you want midtones, and you want dark tones. Those three wrapping around a subject really renders depth quite easily. Now I'm using a medium-sized square-headed brush here, and I'm using a green. This is a mixture of our blue, our primary yellow, and a bit of Mars Black as well. I'm just creating a base coat here, something to work on top of, and so it's fairly easy with our application style. I'm trying to ensure that the tops of the trees are small, and then they slowly get larger as we move down towards them. Generally, with trees like this, at the top, the branches kind of stick up, but we'll be applying a lot of snow onto this tree, which is quite heavy and will drag all of our branches, including the ones at the top, downwards. Though, if you want it to be a little bit more playful, you could have some of those top branches kind of belling upwards. Here you can see that I'm also applying some smaller trees, just to include a little bit of diversity and ensure that it's still quite interesting. We're framing the painting, using it on both sides, creating a little bit of duality, and we're also giving the painting a little bit of a vignette by ensuring that the edges of it are darker than the center, which will draw the eye into the middle of the painting. Now we need to let that dry in its entirety before we do our next application, and that next application is going to be done with our smaller square-headed brush, as you can see here. We're using a pure titanium white, but you could also mix a little bit of blue into it as well. And here we're just kind of painting on the snow that's fallen onto the trees. Now, as you can see, for the most part, I'm getting the bottom of each branch, all of the foliage, and then I'm kind of blending it upwards. And I'm not blending it up all the way because branches on top of it are stopping the snow from falling in those areas. So they're going to be dark because there's going to be a shadow cast upon them, and they're also not going to have any snow on them either. I'm trying to keep this fairly diverse, or as diverse as I can. If you were to take more time, you could definitely get it to be a little bit more interesting, but we're just kind of creating this stair-like effect going down the tree. Here I'm also doing it in the trees that are a little bit farther back, and we're going to be a little bit more impressionistic with that. When you're working in a painting and you want the foreground to really stand out, generally you want to incorporate much more detail, you make it more realistic. Whereas the background, you can be a little bit more impressionistic. It can be a little bit more loose and fluid. And this just helps you draw the eye and create a lot of focus as well. So now we've had some practice, we did a great job over on one side, and we're now going to move over to the other. Here I'm doing a very similar application style. A lot of it is done with a tapping effect. It's also worth noting, acrylic paints are semi-transparent, so when you're applying this white over top of the black, generally you'll see through it to a point and you're not going to get a pure white. So you have to go back and do additional applications to build it up. But if you do a bit of a tapping motion, generally you can do a much more thick application of paint and it will be more opaque. So it's another way of saving time, and it's also a way of applying paint a little bit differently to kind of have fun or render different effects. You can do a general blend and drag of the brush, or you can do a tapping effect, both of which will render nice results, and they're better in different situations. So with that said, I'm taking my medium-sized round-headed brush. It has a lot of water, it has some of that nice bright blue that we used on the horizon, and I'm creating this glowing effect right in the top middle of our painting. Then I'm taking a smaller round-headed brush with only water, and I'm blending that out in all directions using a circular motion. This way it really looks like a subtle glow. Now I'm going to let that dry before I apply our star to it, and I'm going to go back down to our base and apply a little bit of snow, a little bit of fog, a little bit of mist. It's very far away, so at this point we can't really tell exactly what it is, but all of them make sense within the context of the painting, and it's kind of the viewer's choice there, which makes it fun. Now I'm taking my smaller square-headed brush and I just drew in that star with some titanium white paint. It blended with the blue a little bit, so it's not as bright or vibrant as we'd like it to be, but we can always go back and add additional layers once it's dry. Then I'm taking my smaller round-headed brush and I'm incorporating some lights back there in the distance for a little bit of a town. Then I'm also dragging some of that highlight down into the water for a reflection. I'm keeping it very subtle in the water at first. There's a lot of water on the brush so that it's very transparent, and we're just going to build this up as we like it. Here you can see I'm doing a little bit more, but again, it is still incredibly subtle. So at this point, we're going to go back in, and now we're going to incorporate a slightly different color of lights. And here we have more of an orange tone. I'm also going to throw some reflections into the water with that orange tone. I'm going to be fairly consistent in applying that reflection underneath the initial application of the orange. It's far away and we won't really be able to tell the details too well, but it will make a little bit of a difference if anyone spends a good amount of time looking at the painting. Then I'm going to go back to my canvas and cover it with my hand, because that is so efficient for these videos. I do apologize, but I'm just doing a little bit of touch-ups there, as you can see. Nothing really overwhelming, and it's not a new technique either. I'm just kind of going in and adding little things. But here I'm taking the square-headed brush and I'm adding in snow to roofs on buildings we haven't painted. But the implication of them, the roof itself and the light, is generally enough to give the eye and the viewer an idea of what's going on, and they kind of, with their imagination, fill in the rest. Again, it's more of an impressionistic background. It's a little bit more where you give the viewer an opportunity to create something with it, which I think is really interesting. Then I added a couple of additional highlights into the water and the reflection. I did that with a brighter yellow, and I'm going back up to the star with that as well. So it's all turning out quite nice, and here next I'm going to take a bit of an artistic liberty. As you can see, the sky is void of clouds, so it doesn't really make sense that snow would be falling. However, it's a painting, and we can do what we want with it. If we feel it aids the story and the aesthetic, and maybe it gives it this surreal, magical quality, we can do that. So here I'm taking a smaller, round-headed brush, and I'm just incorporating some snow falling from the sky. Some of the snow is much more bright and large than other falling pieces. Some is more transparent, some is more opaque. I'm trying to keep it very diverse and interesting. I'm trying to make it look like the snow is falling over a long distance rather than in a curtain right in front of us, and I'm trying to build depth with it. So as you can see, we're just going back and doing a lot of that. Now, with that being said, that is essentially our 10-minute painting, but as per usual, I had a couple of extra ideas. I thought I'd share them with you. So here what we're doing is creating larger snow that's very close to us and it's blurred in our vision. So I'm applying a lot of water, some titanium white, and then I'm moving the paint around and getting this very transparent, large look. It's great because it fits with the rest of the snow in terms of its shape, and then it also just adds an additional layer of depth. Then I'm adding an additional highlight to the star to finish off the painting. But there we have it, another holiday 10-minute painting. I truly hope you've enjoyed, and again, if you're interested, my book, Acrylics for Beginners, is on sale for the next 7 days. So if you're interested in that, go check it out, link in the description. I post these videos every Saturday. I hope to see you next Saturday. Thank you so much for watching, and above all, as always, stay creative.